Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of STEM Girls Virtual. On this show, we talk about different careers in the STEM fields, those fields being science, technology, engineering, and math. Today, we have Sarah Strickland with us. Sarah is the executive director of the Cincinnati Fire Museum. Sarah, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a joy to be here.
Yeah, and you got a really cool backdrop. So, my first question is, can you tell us a little bit about the Cincinnati Fire Museum?
Yes, definitely. Well, we're located at 315 West Court Street downtown. We're kind of right behind City Hall, where we exist in an old firehouse that's absolutely beautiful. It was actually designed by the famous Cincinnati architect Harry Hake, who also designed Crosley Field and the beautiful Art Deco building for Cincinnati Bell and the Queen City Club building. I mean, he just has a wonderful resume, and that's one of the reasons our firehouse is so beautiful. It hasn't been an operating firehouse for a very long time, but we've been a museum for 41 years this year. Yeah, and we're open right now. We're open our normal hours. We're open 10 to 4, Tuesday through Saturday. We have a really cool online series that we're hosting right now where we have all kinds of wonderful people from the community coming in and kind of sharing about their organizations. And we also do a lot of fire safety videos online with firefighters and some history presentations. So we have a lot going on right now. It's been a strange year for us, as I'm sure every nonprofit and cultural institution can relate to, every small business in general. But we've really kind of tried to use our time wisely, and we've really kind of created a space for ourselves in the online world, and it's working out great. So I definitely encourage everyone to follow us on Facebook and on Instagram and see what kind of cool stuff we have going on.
Awesome. And as someone who has visited the Fire Museum, it really is, like you were saying, a truly beautiful setting. It is so awesome to see that it is an old fire station, and you can still see remnants of that throughout the building. And we will share access links to your website, Facebook, everything, so people can easily follow what the Fire
Awesome.
Museum is doing. Yeah. And some people may not know this, but Cincinnati actually had the first paid fire department all the way back in 1853. Can you tell us why there was a need to pay firefighters professionally?
Yes, for sure. Well, one of the reasons is kind of a fun story to tell. And a lot of people, when we talk about this part of the fire department's history, kind of think about the movie Gangs of New York. There's a scene where there's two volunteer fire companies fighting to get to the fire and put it out first. Well, that was true. That really did happen. There was a lot of rivalry in firefighting and between firehouses. And in the mid 1800s, the city was really growing in population. So everyone was getting grouchy. There was civil unrest in the city. Firefighters were getting very rambunctious, and there's a lot of house fighting. And the older guys, and I do mean guys at this point, it was all gentlemen on the fire department, were kind of embarrassed by the way the younger firefighters were behaving. And it was just it was not even in the fire department that they realized there needed to be reform, but the whole community saw it. And firefighters kind of became simultaneous with fighting and just all this rivalry. So there just really was, the city was growing, and we just needed a professional paid department. Yeah. So kind of a fun story to tell, but also not the proudest part of Cincinnati's firefighting history.
Well, today, if we saw a fire and saw two different companies fighting, that would be very jarring for folks, because normally they would join together and have a common cause. So yeah, that would be a little disconcerting to see that. So the first fire chief was a man by the name of Miles Greenwood, and he actually developed the first steam-powered fire engine. Can you tell us what a steam-powered fire engine did? Why was that a big deal?
It was a huge deal because at that point they were fighting fires with hand pumpers. So they were literally men were using their hands to pump and build pressure, to build water, to shoot it onto a fire. So as you can imagine, it did work, and it took a lot of men to operate it properly and efficiently. But with a steam engine, I mean, obviously steam is energy, and creating that energy to be able to really have a stream of water very forcefully help suppress a fire. I mean, it really just revolutionized the way we fight fires. And Cincinnati was definitely leading the charge in that way, which is a really cool fact. We were not only the first paid professional fire department, but the first to use steamers as a paid professional fire department, and also the first to use horses to pull steamers after once horses were introduced to do that.
Wow, and a lot has changed since the 1850s in terms of firefighting. Um, so could you maybe give us some important developments in firefighting over the last 150 plus years?
Yeah, well, I would say the earliest development that revolutionized how fires were fought was trading in buckets for the hand pumpers. And that happened in the beginning of the 1800s. As we just talked about, steam engines replaced hand pumping engines, is what we'd call them now. And that obviously revolutionized the way we fought fires. And men were replaced by horses to haul equipment to the scene. So that was very revolutionary and helped fires get fought quicker in a quicker time. I would say that steamers were in existence for about 60 years until our first gas-powered engine was purchased, and that was in the beginning of the 1900s, probably around 1912 or so. And then at that time, once we had gas-powered engines, we no longer needed horses. We didn't need men to pull our rigs. We didn't need horses to. So obviously, things changed a lot. And then I would say by the early 20s, the whole department was completely gas-powered engines.
Wow. And just
completely motorized.
Right. Just the efficiency from going from buckets to now having gas-powered engines. I'm sure a lot of lives were saved. I'm sure a lot of property was, if not completely saved, was not completely gone either.
Right.
Because in the 1850s, things are still being built in wood a lot too, like that's something too where a fire could spread really quickly depending on what the building was built out of. And so that's amazing that they were able to see that progression. Wow. Yeah. And so the Fire Museum does have fire engines on display. What kind of engines do you all have?
Well, speaking of the hand pumpers, we have a wonderful 1816 old hand pumper that you can come see. With we have mannequins around our museum in our exhibits, excuse me, as part of our exhibits. And the mannequins, I think at first when people see them, they're kind of taken aback because it is definitely an old style way to design an exhibit. But these mannequins were actually fashioned after real firefighters at the time the museum was created. So we do have a couple of mannequins downstairs demonstrating how a hand pumper is used. And we have, I'm not sure who built it, but it's the neatest thing. We have this toy hand pumper that kids or adults alike can get on one side and actually see how you're making pressure with the water. And then there's a little nozzle inside of this little kind of game, for lack of a better word, and you can see the water shooting out. So it definitely kind of helps you realize, how a hand pumper was used. But yeah, so we have an old hand pumper. We have old hose carts that used to carry the hoses to a fire. They had their own separate rig at that time. We have an old horse-drawn ladder wagon from the 1800s. This behind me is probably our most iconic artifact in the museum, and it's an old steam engine built here in Cincinnati, actually, although it retired from a department in Indiana. And then our newest engine is an Aaron's Fox pumper from Northern Hills, actually, and that retired in the late 50s, 1950s. So, yeah. I think, I for folks who've never been to the Fire Museum before, I think they're usually pretty impressed with what a rich history the city has in regards to firefighting. And the really cool thing about the museum is everything that's on display is the equipment and apparatus that was actually used to fight fires during their respective time periods. Nothing is replicas. The leather fire buckets we have downstairs in cases are the fire buckets that were used in the 1800s. This steaminger behind me was used to fight fire. Everything you see around here was actual equipment. So it really is a fun learning experience. And also kind of shocking to see what a big role the fire department in Cincinnati played in revolutionizing firefighting.
Right, because I think sometimes when we think of large firefighting companies, we think of Boston, New York, Chicago, but Cincinnati at that time in the 1850s was like the 5th or 6th largest city in the country. So it makes sense that it was leading the way in how firefighting departments should operate and making them professional and not volunteer and everything. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, for anyone who loves old cars or anything like that, it is really neat to see just how well the pieces are like condition wise. And again, it's just really neat to see the history progress. And I've seen the mannequins. I didn't know they were based off of, that's really cool that they were based off of actual firefighters. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun fact about our mannequins here.
Yeah, like your grandpa's a mannequin in a fire museum. So the Fire Museum not only talks about the past history of Cincinnati firefighting, but also highlights modern firefighting as well, correct?
It does. So our exhibits basically span the bucket brigade of the 1800s up to modern day firefighting. I will say the museum was created in the early 1980s. So at that point was we only showcase as modern as firefighting was up until then. But we have some really awesome tools on display, like the jaws of life that firefighters use in really bad emergencies when they need to pry open heavy equipment. So we definitely, obviously we have motorized vehicle to see, but we don't have the really cool stuff that the fire department uses now, which I'd be happy to chat with any visitor about, because I just think some of the stuff that they use now is just so amazing, especially working in a history museum and walking past leather buckets and hose carts. And now they have Bluetooths in their helmets so that the commander can give them orders and they can stay in communication with each other. And just, they have thermal imaging cameras so that when they go into a burning building, if it's smoke filled, they can see if there's life in there, if there's pets, if there's humans. So just this revolutionary tools that they use now, like firefighters just have cool stuff.
They do.
So we're missing a little bit of that part, but
no, but yeah, that's still really neat that you could still go and learn that as you're visiting.
Yeah.
So one thing that really stuck out to me when I last visited was how much uniforms have changed. Can you talk about what firefighters used to wear and maybe speak to a little bit to what they're wearing today? We just talked about Bluetooth helmets.
Right.
So that's really neat.
Yeah, so PPE has definitely, or protective clothing has definitely come a long way. They actually used rubber turnouts probably up into the 70s. So the coats that you would see would actually be rubber and have like yellow reflective stripes. And what's funny is I was actually talking to a retired firefighter this morning, and he used to work in the area that would launder the turnouts. But firefighters didn't want to give up their uniforms because it was a sense of pride of, look how smoky my uniform is and look how many fires I've been to. It's really a badge of honor. But now firefighters wear, I'm trying to think of the material that it's called that it's made out of, probably like Nomex, or that's what their turnouts are made out of now. And it's obviously a fabric that is fire resistant. And also helmets have changed a lot. They were metal at one point. Now they're very durable. They look like a very durable plastic. They're made of fiberglass. So definitely a lot has changed. But what's really interesting to me is what hasn't changed. And like insignias and just the tradition of patches and just really taking care of yourself in your uniform and also your equipment and your rigs. Hasn't changed. Like that part of the traditional firefighting is still the same. And I love that. I mean, if you see a fire engine or a fire truck coming and driving by in your neighborhood, past your house or past a grocery store or wherever, you'll see that they make sure that it's always clean. Mm-hmm. Like it's always just very well maintained and taken care of. And similarly, if you come to the fire museum and you see these antique rigs and these old wooden hand pumpers, they're like beautifully painted. They're very well taken care of, and that part of firefighting tradition is definitely strong and alive still.
Yeah, and I have to say, you probably have one of the coolest backgrounds we've had for an interview, just because you're actually in the museum as we're talking right now.
Yeah,
that's really neat. So
we're closed on Monday, so it's nice and quiet right now. But normally there's definitely laughter of kids sliding down our fire pole. We have a fire pole. kids and adults can slide down.
I did not do a good job of sliding down the fire pole, but it is fun. It's very fun.
It is fun. It's fun and it's safe. It's just a nice little
Yes.
short section that kids can slide down. And mentioning what engines and what apparatus we have in the museum, our most sought after apparatus is we have an E1 cab. So it's a modern day engine, but it's just the cab of it. And kids are allowed to climb in it and turn on the lights. And that's really fun. So you can actually sit behind a real fire engine wheel and steer it and kind of feel what that's like.
Oh man, yeah, no, that is really fun for kids who like to pretend to be firefighters. That's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when people think of firefighting, they think of firemen. But can you tell us a little bit about the first female recruits for the Cincinnati Fire Department? Guests can meet one of them because they're now a volunteer. Is that correct?
Well, so there was 3 women who entered the fire department, and that was in 1984, which is, let's just be honest, slightly embarrassing that women didn't enter until that time. But the 3 women who entered were awesome, wonderful people who I'm actually working with CAFA, which is the Cincinnati African American Firefighter Association, to capture their oral histories. So we make sure that that's preserved forever. Unfortunately, one of them has passed away, but we are working on getting the oral histories of the other ladies. But Vicki Goodson is the one that you're mentioning. And Vicki, my pal Vicki, is on the board of the Fire Museum. She is just awesome, wonderful person. She actually purchased an engine. It's not, it's a modern engine, but it's just not up to par to work at a firehouse. So she actually purchased one and she calls it the Cincinnati Fun Department. And she brings it around on Saturdays in the summers and when it's nice out and gives kids and families rides in her fire engine. So when things get back to normal, a phrase I can't wait to stop saying, Vicki will be back with her fire engine and giving rides and just making everyone's day so happy.
Yeah, like one of my favorite memories from kindergarten is getting to go to the fire department. And you get to try on like a helmet, you get to talk to firefighters, learn about fire safety, you get to sit in the so that's awesome that she comes down and brings an old fire rig down to let you sit in and get a ride in. That's really cool. So a big part of the Fire Museum is talking about fire safety. So could you share with us some basic fire safety practices for our viewers? And again, we can share some fire safety practices and sites within the description of the event as well.
Okay. Yeah. So like you said, this fire safety is a big part of the museum's mission. So we're a dual mission museum, stewarding the history of local firefighting. And I do mean local, not just Cincinnati, but our neighbors from all around. And also we teach fire safety education. So it's definitely been a strange year with COVID, with the pandemic. So we haven't gotten as many classes in as we normally would, but we do have an exhibit dedicated to fire prevention and fire safety. And that exhibit's called the Safe House. We're actually raising money to update the Safe House right now. But families can come in. It's not just for student groups. That's just who utilizes it mostly. But basically you walk through a mock house and you learn fire safety tips, not to overload outlets, to make sure your cords aren't frayed. Don't run cords underneath rugs. Don't run cords in high traffic areas. Have an escape plan. That's really important that families talk about an escape plan. Have a meeting place. If there's an emergency, whether it's a fire or any emergency, it's really great for your family to have a meeting place already designated. So if it's a tree across the street, or if it's your neighbor's porch, or if it's, just some sort of designated place where your family can meet and you can account for everyone. But yeah, I mean, the most important thing that folks, I hope that we impress upon them is working smoking alarms in the bedrooms and outside of the bedrooms, because people have heard this over and over, I'm sure, but they're crucial life-saving devices. And unfortunately, Cincinnati has seen a lot of residential fires this year, more than last year. And we've had residential fire deaths, and those, especially the last one I'm thinking of in my mind, there were no working smoking alarms in the house. So it's just something we're always trying to make sure if they leave with nothing else, that they check their smoke alarms. You really should check them on a monthly basis and change the batteries once a year, but make sure you have working smoke alarms in your house.
No,
That's my PSA on that.
Excellent advice. Some even combine a carbon monoxide detector as well.
Yes.
That's also really important. And we will list some resources on where you can find fire detector installations and where you can get some, because I believe the Red Cross will hand them out.
Yeah, I need to check into that. But as far as I know, their program still exists, and they give out fire alarms and help with the installation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So your museum's website has a lot of great information on it. Again, about fire safety, the history of the department. But if our viewers would like to learn more about other fire resources, can you suggest some?
Yeah, for sure. So, well, in terms of fire safety, FEMA has wonderful information on their site that's all free and downloadable and great resource for teachers for teaching fire safety. And so does the NFPA. That's kind of, they're the leaders in kind of setting the standards for fire safety and prevention education. So that's another great website that you can visit. As far as the history, the public library has, we're so lucky to have an amazing public library in Cincinnati. They're just a wealth of knowledge and resources, and especially this one close to the museum. If you have a specific question or specific theme in firefighting that you're researching, I'm sure that there's something for you there. There's this wonderful book called The History of Cincinnati Fire Department. It's a beautiful book. Not exactly sure when it was published, but I'll include a photo for you so you can show it. There's actually, our oldest artifact in the museum is this big gigantic drum, and it's from 1808, and that was used to summon firefighters to a fire. And there's a picture of the drum in the book, and it's talked about in the book.
They'd hit the drum, and that was like the fire. Wow.
Yes. And that was replaced by a gigantic bell, and we have that bell on display as well. So that's actually one of my favorite things to show off in the museum is this giant drum was really used as a fire alarm, basically. And it was replaced by this gigantic bell that's on the second floor. Like, how cool is that? Yeah, so that's just a really, really kind of fun couple of artifacts that we have here at the museum.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, I just love the idea of someone banging a bell or a drum to let people know there's a fire. My last question for you, Sarah, is what advice would you give to young women and girls who may be interested in wanting to become a firefighter?
Do it. All the women I've met who have fire department careers love it. They find it very rewarding. It's a service to your community. Times have changed. It's unfortunate that it took up until 1984 for women to enter the department, but we have an absolutely wonderful fire chief right now, Chief Winston. He's actually retiring. I'm a bit sad about that, but he has done so much in terms of making sure women are comfortable in the fire department, because firehouses and uniforms and all of these, things that go into the job were built for men because men were firefighters up until recently, right? So they've made uniform changes and accommodations in the firehouses. They've just really done their part to make sure women feel welcome in the department. And if anyone is interested they're actually recruiting right now. Now's the time. The fire department is recruiting. And if you are really interested and want to know more, reach out to me. I'd love to connect you to some fighters in the department that are female and who would be, I'm sure, great mentors and give you some wonderful advice.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, it's always important to seek out mentors or peers. And especially, again, people like talking about their jobs. So I'm sure there are firefighters out there who would love to talk about the work they do and what a day in the life of a firefighter can be and everything. So that's great. So thank you. Yes, we will share some contact information for Sarah and the Fire Museum if you are interested in being connected with any Cincinnati firefighters. Yeah. Well,
Wonderful.
Sarah, thank you so much. This has been great, and I'm really excited to get to visit the Fire Museum soon and revisit the Fire Museum soon.
Awesome. Yeah. I look forward to seeing more people. I think our audience has developed a little because of our online series, and we've gotten so many visitors who are first time visitors. And I just encourage you, if you've not been to the museum, please, we're open. We're we're a quiet space where we don't get terribly crowded. So it's a great place to really visit during the pandemic because we're able to socially distance, and obviously our visitors must wear masks while they're here. But yeah, I definitely encourage everyone to get down here.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for joining us, Sarah, and thank you everyone else for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Well, thanks for having me.